I guess we can get started. All right, so welcome everyone, ladies and gentlemen, friends at home and abroad. Welcome to the Silicon Valley Leadership Community. Welcome to SVLC. Just a quick intro to our organization if this is your first time attending. SVLC was created in 2019 by 4 executives from top technology companies. We're currently one of the world's fastest growing leadership communities with hundreds of well-known leaders, including distinguished executives and managers from well-established companies, university professors, MBAs from top business schools, VCs, and entrepreneurs across Silicon Valley and beyond. We have thousands of select members with the mission and commitment to help leaders grow. So before we start, I also want to introduce and thank our media partner for today's forum, IntelliPro Group. IntelliPro Group was founded in 2009. Also based in Silicon Valley, and is one of the leading strategic management consulting and HR resource providers in North America. They utilize AI, big data, SaaS technology, and more in order to provide solid resources to tech partners around the world for both flexible staffing, RPO, training, executive search, and more. So I'd like to kick off our event today by introducing our speakers. First of all, I'd like to welcome Ganesh Iyer. He is the managing director of NEO in the US and vice president and CIO of global digital development and operations for NEO. He's a business savvy CIO and digital ops executive with over 30 years of experience delivering proven results in various industries, including autonomous tech, high tech, manufacturing, and telecom. He's recognized for achieving significant growth in historically challenged digital organizations and in emerging and global markets. He is an expert at change management and building relationships across the organization to achieve company goals. Our next guest and speaker, Shen Jackson, is the ex-VP of hardware engineering and is currently a leader in a stealth startup at the moment. So Shen Jackson was most recently VP and supply chain of hardware and engineering and supply chain at a startup that's still in stealth mode, as mentioned. And prior to his most recent venture, Shen was at Tesla for 7 years, leaving as a director of manufacturing engineering for General Assembly. He started at Tesla as an engineer leading the deployment of parts for the Model S body manufacturing line. He then led the team that designed and implemented the Model X body manufacturing line. Prior to Tesla, Shen was an engineer at Daystar, where he worked on physical vapor deposition of the CIGS for solar panels. Shen started his career at AGC, making and coating flat glass. Our third speaker is Han Shen. Han is the founder and owner of Post PC Labs, where he incubates projects designed to improve corporate and personal productivity and communication. Post PC Labs leverages freelancers, cloud computing, and modern software frameworks to build projects faster than conventional startup approaches. Prior to starting Post PC Labs, Han was SVP of engineering at Upwork, where he oversees the company's online platform, as well as distributed technical teams of more than 300 people who power it. Han built and led engineering teams at eBay and Netflix, focusing on mobile and business incubation. Han was also co-founder of BuddyStumbler.com, an instant messaging-based social networking site. And finally, I'd like to introduce our illustrious moderator for today's event, Lily Zhang. Lily Zhang is the director of engineering for Shoppers and Instacart. Prior to Instacart, she spent 6 years in Amazon, 3 years in Facebook, and co-founded a company named Renaissance. During her tenure in Amazon, she was one of the founding members who created Amazon's device-to-device communication framework, Whisperplay. In Facebook, she created and grew Facebook Stories from scratch. Today, it has more than 800 daily million users. Lily has a master's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Southern California. She's a strong advocate for women in tech, and in her spare time, she invests in startups. She's a proud mom of 2 and enjoys reading, volleyball, and camping. And with that, Lily, I will leave the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Ross. Happy Friday, everyone. Today, our topic is about diversity. Diversity is a very big topic. It's a hot topic nowadays, and it's a very difficult topic. Many people know it's very important, but don't know why. A lot of people want to do a great job in it, but don't know how. Today, with our panelists, we are going to demystify diversity in tech. Because we all know it's a very hard topic, I want to keep it lighthearted and embrace our uniqueness first. So I will start running a round of lightning small talks to warm up the floor. I will start with myself. My name's Lily, proud mom of 2. I've been in tech for 10 years. Oftentimes, I'm the only woman in the room. And then oftentimes I thought, when I can't be in the spotlight. And today I'm here moderating this panel. And next one, I will give it to Shen.
Hi, yeah, I also am a father of 2. Something a lot of people don't know about me is I grew up in South America, in Guyana. I was born in the U.S., but I spent 17 years living north of the Amazon. So, all right.
Great. Next one is Han.
I am a proud father of a 9-year-old cat. She's very cute. The one thing that I get a lot of questions about all the time is, why is my English so good? It turns out that I immigrated to the country when I was 7 months old. But when I turned 5 and became a US citizen, I chose to keep my original ethnic name.
That's great. Now it's Ganesh.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ganesh Iyer. As Ross introduced, I'm the Managing Director for NEO US Operations and the Global CIO for NEO. Happily married for 25 years to my wife, and I have 2 boys. The older one is just graduated out of college, so he's off of my payroll. And the younger one is senior in high school. So when I get free time outside of work, I'm a sports enthusiast, and I love watching all sorts of sports, in particular basketball, volleyball, and the football itself. So that's my passionate time. Whenever I get free time, that's what I use it as my stress reliever. So happy to be here with talking to all of you about this wonderful topic of culture, diversity, and innovation.
Yeah. After the first round of lightning talks, I want to dive in a little bit about each of our panelists' unique background. As you'll see, everyone here is very different. I will start with Ganesh. I read your bio. You've been working 4 whole years for a company that's headquartered in Shanghai with global operations. How can that be even working for you?
Well, yes, it has been a little over 4 years. Prior to that, I was at Tesla, like Sean or Shen. I didn't know that he was there until this panel came through. So I was there about for closely 5 years before I decided to join here. So one of the main reasons what excited me to join NEO is about the vision itself of the company, which is to be a user enterprise, to become the user enterprise of tomorrow. And so I was very excited with our founding team. Happened to be the Chinese leaders, but their philosophy was to start something called a global company. As we all know, the startups are usually born in a region, in a city, or in a country. Then they go through the ranks of small, medium, large, then become global. Whereas with NEO, our founding team was thinking about, we want to be a global company from the get-go. What that meant was they wanted to attract the talent, the best talent out there, with cultural diversity and innovative people around the world, wherever they exist. With that vision and the mission, they started the company with the headquarters in Shanghai, but we have a design center, advanced design center in Munich. And where I am responsible for right now is the United States office, which is mainly the Advanced Innovation Center or the R&D Center. And then China is our industrialization thing. So that was the first mindset, start as a global company. Then we started recruiting people with different cultural background. You may think why the culture is important, right? Culture it's an embodiment of the human behavior, how they behave in the societies. So I consider myself, I'm an Indian-born citizen, and I migrated to the United States in 1993. So I'm an American citizen now. So I consider myself as an Indian and an American with some Western culture. In the last 4 years, I've been in China, so I started appreciating more of it. So I consider myself half and half and half, put it that way. So I'm a Chinese, I'm Indian, and then I'm an American. So I learned all the best of all the worlds, learning Chinese culture from my Chinese colleagues, and of course from the Western culture from the Americans and my colleagues here, and of course my rich culture back in India. So the experience has been nothing but positive, to able to learn and teach from various smart people that I interact with on a daily basis. whether it's in Europe, whether it's in different parts of China, or here in San Jose in Silicon Valley. So that's that's a main reason why I joined Neo, to become that part of that global, rich, culturally rich, and innovative company. And many companies don't think about it in that way. They all start in one region, one country, and then slowly figure it out. So we started with that. Then we recruited the talent with different cultural diversity. Then the results speak for itself. We started innovating much faster than we thought we could, had we started in one country and one region with one culture. So I've seen it tremendous, tremendous benefit of leaders thinking in those lines to start globally, but think and act locally as appropriate. So that's been my experience, Lily.
Great. So there are two things you talk about I resonate a lot, is both from designing a global company from get-go and then build a very strong culture and think about how do you attract talents. And then I noticed, Han, you also have like a cross-country experience. You are a immigrant. You mentioned that you have been in Guyana for many years and moved back to US. Can you share a little bit more on your cultural differences, and then like how do you compare and contrast the cultures in US and there?
I think that's for me. Yeah, so I was born in the US, and but really all my formative time was in Guyana. And Guyana is a really racially mixed country. So we have the two predominant races are Indian and Black. And the politics is also very, very mixed. But we also have a very large indigenous population. A lot of Chinese live there, and a lot of people originally from Portugal. And so how that really manifests in Guyana is really through food. So our national dishes come from one of these people. And it's interesting, last weekend, Gordon Ramsay had a show that was based in Guyana that focused on indigenous cooking. Now, when I moved to the US, it was really stark to me, like the differences between coming from a place where Blacks were almost a majority to the US that some places are still very segregated, right? I went to school in Missouri, and then I lived in New York City during the summers. And in all honesty, living in Missouri and living in New York might as well have been two different countries, right? The cultures were completely different. Then when I moved out to Silicon Valley, again, it was like moving to a third different country within the United States. And Silicon Valley has this reputation of being a very liberal place. And certainly when I got to Tesla, Elon really asked the recruiting team. When I joined Tesla, there were less than 1,000 people. And Elon had tasked the recruiting team with hiring great engineers. He did not care where they came from. But that meant he didn't care if they came from Germany or from the US or from Japan. What he cared about was they were really good engineers, right? And you contrast that, there was another company that started around the same time as Tesla called Fisker. And the original version of Fisker did not make it. And I really think that one of the big reasons why they didn't make it is because every person they hired came from the automotive industry. When I walked into Tesla on day one, it was the first time I'd ever been to an automotive factory, but I'd been an engineer for years. And so the talent that was there was incredible. And you can see it today, right? The products that they make are exceptional. And a lot of that is because they brought people in from not just around the world, but also from different industries. And so people challenged all the preconceived notions that existed in the automotive industry because they'd never been in the automotive industry before. And so I think that when people think about diversity, we're always thinking about quotas and checking boxes. Do you have a certain number of minorities in your company, or what's the ratio of men to women? But I think people need to expand that and start thinking about how many do we all think the same? We could have six people from 6 different races, but if we all went to Stanford for a certain, between 2000 and 2004, chances are we're not super diverse.
There are a couple of things I think you remind me of one saying. I think I paraphrased from Elon Musk. He said, "I don't really care where you come from. I don't even care if you graduate from high school. So as long as you are a good engineer, you deserve to be here." I think that's really, really empowering.
Yeah.
And I think that the part that's also even more empowering is the value that he values a lot of the different opinions and hope people are comfortable. I think that's very great.
Yeah, that is true. At Tesla, oftentimes, if an intern was really good, we would try to have them not go back to school, because essentially your degree is meaningless because you're already doing the job.
So now, Han, when I first chatted with you, you told me you have been the executive sponsor for DIBS, is short for diversity, inclusion, and also belongings at Upwork, and oversaw the LGBT group. Can you share a little more about your experience over there?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Upwork is the world's largest freelancer marketplace. It brings together people who need work done with people who can do the work across a variety of different workloads, including things all the way from design to software engineering to machine learning to things like sales, marketing. You can even find somebody who can solve your CAPTCHAs for you and do other nefarious things. So that being said, it moves a couple $1 billion a year. And the organization is therefore very, very mission driven. And despite that backdrop, I think, and despite that openness, especially in the context of the fact that the company actually hires freelancers to work inside the company, more than half of the workforce total is hired actually off the platform. There was still a very strong need to drive diversity programs within the company. Even with that backdrop, when I joined, I discovered that within engineering in the Bay Area, I had precisely 6 women in engineering. And as I started to look at payroll, I also saw very disturbing variances in terms of how compensation differed based on gender, which was in certain cases very glaring. And so those kinds of moments really awakened me to the fact that even well-intentioned companies over time really need to pay attention to diversity. And so I had started a Women in Engineering effort initially. And over the years, I got involved with various other corporate sponsored groups, including the LGBTQ group. And it was very, very enlightening because what you'll find is that the topic is very complex. The solutions are oftentimes not simple. Even within these advocacy groups, the strategies in which they would like to advocate for may vary depending on which population you're in or even within the group itself.
We touch on a lot of different topics. We touch on the diversity of culture. We touch on gender diversity. We touch on how do we be inclusive of people of different color or minority or majorities. And then there are 3 terms actually I got exposed to when I talked to Han. Is diversity, inclusions, and belongings are the words that we oftentimes use in conjunction with today's topic of diversity. How do you define the concepts in your mind? And then if how do you think they are relating to each other? If you want to focus on one, which one would you want to focus on? Okay, you can start.
I'll take it. For me, I think inclusion is something that's really important, right? A lot of companies focus on the top line, right? It's like oh man, let's be really diverse, right? And they roll out their statistics and then pat themselves on the back. And there really has to be an effort that's made to include people. So not just having someone. I'll tell you guys a story. A friend of mine is an auditor, and he works in the South, and he audits like these very large companies, and so he's often working for the board of directors. And he said that he's seen recently, as he goes through all these corporate boards, that they usually have one woman or one black person. And so when he looks, then he realizes that he never works with either one of those people, because he's usually working with whoever runs the audit committee. And what he's found is that those people, when there's one of them, they're usually relegated to some committee that doesn't have as much importance on the board. So you can have people they will have the fancy titles, but they're not actually part of the decision-making process. And so you have not included them. So you've hired someone for a statistic, and you're not actually getting the benefit of the diversity that you were focused on. So I think like inclusion is something you actively have to strive for, right? You can go out and anyone can make a 3-month pitch. If you were a large company, you can say, hey, I want to increase the amount of women or the amount of Hispanics, whatever group in the company, and you can make a concerted effort to hire those people. But including them in terms of top-line decision-making in a company is something that is part of culture, and it is a multi-year campaign that you have to mount. It is the hard part.
I can share my perspective on this. I agree with him. But to me, all the three terms are equally important, and they are intertwined. Culture it's mainly, it embodies, me as a human being, my behaviors, how I behave in my society, my custom, my belief. Culture is a belief, right? I honestly believe that, it's a belief. Whereas in diversity is to acknowledge the fact that each individual is unique, and recognizing that, each individual has differences. The differences could be in, the race, ethnicity, religions, ideologies, you name it, and gender, for example. So within my company, we very, very focused in our HR team globally. They focus on the diversity as one of the key elements. To that point, for every position, every recruiting position that we have, we make sure that at least we receive at least one female candidate, for example. In engineering jobs, sometimes it is so hard to get a lot of resumes, especially with different diversified backgrounds, especially in the female side. So we made it a point that for every recruiting job, any manager or a director or a vice president post, we want to make sure that we receive at least one, if not more, resumes from the female candidate. And also on the interview panel, we make sure that with at least one female, so that we get a complete perspective of that person, not just on their domain expertise, but also all the cultural aspects, how this person behave if we were to hire him or her. So, that's one aspect. And to promote that, we believe in the culture. We also have different forums that we establish. Within NEO, from the beginning itself, we started a NEO Women Forum. It's mainly the idea is to, not only empower the female engineers and the female employees that we currently have and future we recruited, also give them a platform for them to feel proud of their existence in this company and the value that they bring in and then the culture they bring in. And there is an executive level commitment for that program. And that team has a, formal charter, bylaws, it's like a, formal entity by itself within the company. Why it is important? Because we value in that that diversity is equally important as any other work deliverable that you may have on your project you're working. So to sum it up, I think all these three terms are intertwined, and leaders who believe that these are intertwined and it's equally important for the success of their organization and for the success of their business outcome are the ones to thrive. Those organizations are the ones to thrive. I'm so proud that my company is actually paying a lot of emphasis in all of them, along with the innovation aspect.
So Han, do you want to talk about more about the belonging part? Because we do cover the first two.
Yeah, I personally recommend that organizations that are just starting on their DIBS journey to really focus on the belonging piece. Numerous studies have shown over the years, just from a workforce perspective, the #1 reason that people leave companies is because something about the company or the environment or their boss, they make them feel like they don't belong. And so you may very well be at a starting point where your organization, your team, or your company isn't quite where you want it to be. So the first thing you need to do is really take care of the minority populations that you have, right? And that is on a very individualized basis. So even though they may look around and they say, hey, there's nobody quite like me, making sure that they feel like they belong, that they feel like they're heard is a key part of that equation. And a lot of that formula of making anybody feel like they belong have parts of the inclusion piece and the diversity piece. In the inclusion side, you want to do exactly what Shen said, right? You have to bring those individuals into key decision-making positions. In many organizations, it is a very difficult problem, as Shen alluded to, in large part because diversity at the executive ranks is just not there. So even if you solve the pipeline problem at the lower ranks, you don't necessarily have that diversity of thought there. So that is a longer journey. And then improving the demography of your organization is not a trivial problem because there could be systemic pipeline challenges. However, if you figure out how to retain your employees, you make them feel like they belong, they have a better chance of inviting, people who are like them to say, you know what, I work at a great company. And I think that's a really great strategy to build off of if you are just starting out.
I just want to add to that belonging point also. Han, it's a great point you mentioned. Again, as part of my company culture, we have over 60 plus countries, engineers and employees who come from the 60 plus countries. So as part of our orientation, just to make that each of the new hires that they belong in this company, starting with we have a map, world map, and then we ask those employees just go and then place a pin on the country or the city from where you actually belong, because it's important, right? So and then we've during the we also have something called team time, once a month. Don't talk about the projects. It's mainly just have fun and then talk to people whom you haven't talked to outside of your department before. The idea is to have foster their dialogue, thereby we have a learn and teach culture. Whereas you learn why are you not smiling, Han? There must be some reason. Unless and until I take my time to put myself into your shoe and then have a coffee together, I won't even find out. I will just preclude or presume the reason why you may be thinking you may be so grumpy, right? It's important to spend that quality time with this. So we spend that on once a month for a couple of hours and have a beer at the end to have some fun. But the point is, that having that a lot of quality time together, outside of the project talks and project work is equally important to actually, emphasize that belongings part that you just mentioned.
Yeah, there's one thing I want to double down on. Like I was resonating a lot from Shen's conversation and the rest of the panels is we have a lot of companies doing diversity projects. And then the measurement seems to be very, very simple. There's a ratio, there's a number we want to hit and we hit them, and then let's call it done. And then how do we even set goals for our company? Like how do we measure our success in the diversity program?
That is tough, right? Because I think that the top line number doesn't matter so much, right? It's the thing that gets headlines, right? But I think that Han really touched on something when he talked, in what he just said, right? It's a long-term project, and and measuring like people's satisfaction. Like I really believe in the net promoter score, right? Like are the people who work in your company, are they promoting your company? And you know, it's something a lot of people have caught on to the fact that, oh, if I want to hire more women, I need to make sure that on that panel there are women on the panel, right? Otherwise, women are just, and that goes for like whatever demographic you're trying to hire for. You know, people want to see someone like them or someone they can ask a really honest question to during their interview. But real like job satisfaction is a long-term thing, and yeah, you can go ahead and you can at the end of the quarter or year or whatever it is you've done, you've grown your team and you've looked around and you said, hey, this is a really diverse team, and you're happy about it. You really, the job's not done for probably a couple of years. 2 years later, you need to sit back and, or every quarter, you need to be measuring how happy are the employees, and they need to be able to have some kind of forum where they can be brutally honest about what is not working in the company. And then you as a leader have to be ruthless about fixing those problems, right? Because, you know, I remember once in a meeting, there was, you know, a room of executives in the middle of this really tough time at Tesla, and a friend of mine and I were complaining that, man, we're the only Black people, you know, who are you know, essentially directors of Tesla. It was a really small bunch, right? And then the person we were complaining to was a woman, and she said, well, you know, I go to all these meetings where there are 2 Black men and there's only me, right? And even me as a minority, I was kind of focusing on, you know, the lack of representation that we had, but I had ignored the fact that there was another group that was even less represented. And so, you know, she has to be really careful when she's in those meetings because she feels like she's representing her entire gender. And so I do think that these are like really long-term things, right? Like we, you know, the whole, like, it's going to be the same thing for like the country, for example. The country's woken up to the issues of racial injustice. They're not going to be fixed in the next 6 months, right? They're going to, it's something it's going to be many years. And I think that companies that are going to be successful in terms of creating this, creating divs, right? And excelling at it is going to be something that they constantly measure, right? And they're constantly talking about it because this is a really uncomfortable topic for a lot of people, right? And so I think that the more open and the more actual conversations, difficult conversations that happen, mean that, and if you have your minority or your female employees that are happier and happier over many years, then the company is more likely to be successful.
Here's a piece we talk about, like we have a safe environment for the employees to be brutally honest, and then oftentimes I don't really feel they feel safe. They have an environment like that, and then as a org leader or leaders in a business, how do we create an environment where the voices can be amplified in an environment where the minorities have them, but they don't feel they are heard, or they are masking themselves so that they can go with the flow?
Yeah, I think that they're, you know, typically 2 personality types, right? Extroverts and introverts. And I think that companies where they only have these large groups, right? You know, I remember Tesla had a Women in Tesla group, and so you'd have like, you know, a very large gathering, and then people would say, okay, what are the problems? Let's talk about it. And the reality is that it means that every introvert's voice is not being heard. And so I think that if you're really going to foster an environment where people are comfortable having a conversation, those conversations don't necessarily have to just be this big in a public forum, right? People should feel safe about speaking with their peers or their managers or their manager's manager or someone else's manager, whoever it is they feel comfortable with. And then it's really up to those in power to speak for them sometimes, right? And you see this a lot, especially in Silicon Valley. We have a lot of immigrants, right? And we have a lot of people who come from cultures where speaking up is not encouraged. And so it's really up to those of us that have a voice to be their voice, right?
I agree with you, and there are some of the ways that we could, implement. At least I have seen it working in my professional life. Usually this comes with minority groups. They feel that they're not represented, they're not in masses, if you will, in any organization. So they are the ones typically trying to keep quiet because of that. That safety aspect is always in their back of the mind. So a couple of ways to, in my opinion, to solve it. One is, you know, for example, it's as Sean mentioned, for each of those minority groups, is established a formal forum, which needs to be, either taken up by the CEO or the senior leaders of the company, empowering that, or human resources department. So within my company, we have, as I alluded to, we have a women forum. Women often sometimes, they don't want to disclose their issues because of potential retaliation, safety, issues or fear issues. So we have an open culture, an open speaking culture here. So with the women forum, they can speak to the senior leaders in the organization who are females to, speak up on their safety concerns. The second one that we've implemented, I've seen it working, is also having a formal mentorship program. Just have a buddy up with a minority, let's say if it's it's an African American individual, and buddy that up with another senior person of a different race or a different culture. So that way there is that bonding that establishes, and then that will also, in my opinion, alleviate a little bit of that fear factor the minority groups might have in any organization. I've seen that working in both ways.
I can also share some tactics that I've used in the past. I think some of what Shen alluded to is really about creating an environment of psychological safety. So in a lot of cases, especially if you happen to be a leader of an organization or a sizable organization, it really has to start with you to create that psychological safety. And one of the tactics that I would frequently do is every month, like clockwork, I would send a survey out asking people to give me feedback. And then I would publish all the feedback straight as it is. So if they said I was like kind of foolish one day, or I said something I shouldn't have said, I just published the whole thing. And I tell people this is exactly what I'm going to do about it. And I think when you start creating the ability to receive, you start to create this type of flywheel. There are dynamics that Shen mentioned, especially in engineering, where so many folks happen to be introverts. So a lot of the open forums are a challenge because it sort of rewards the person with the most courage. But it doesn't mean that all the people that don't have as much courage don't have meaningful things to add to your operations. And so I would also, especially during my all hands, I happen to have built a tool, which happens to be one of my projects. It's called Meeting Town, that essentially elicits questions from the workforce itself. And it allows people to see all the questions that are being asked and allows them to vote up and vote down, completely anonymous. So the issues around reciprocity, fear of saying the wrong thing is somewhat mitigated by those questions. And for leaders, I think it at times has an incredibly powerful way of highlighting uncomfortable truths that need to be resolved. But there are some very, very concrete tactics one can use to open those pathways of communication that are available to you today. But it is going to take some work, and it also takes quite a bit of personal courage from the leaders themselves.
Can the rest of the panel share some personal tactics? I think I heard another story that's very interesting in this world. That we oftentimes talk about diversity, but there are times there are a person coming in the hallway, and then you say hey, and then you say how are you, and then you say I'm good, and then you pass away. Right? This is very similar to what Shen has said it, but in a smaller scale, like you care about the other person, but you actually don't, and then you're faking it for faking it. So what are some tactics as as a role model to embrace diversity you can do on your daily basis to make the situation better?
I can take my perspective on that one. So oftentimes what I've seen is, especially with companies with different people with different language speaking skills that are coming in. At Neo, as I mentioned, we have over employees from 60 plus different countries, but majority of them are Mandarin speaking. And then of course the English is now the primary second language for them. So in order to get everyone speak and everyone collaborate and everyone actively participate, everything. So from the get-go itself, we have hired and recruited some top-notch translators who are bilingual and who can translate in at least 2 to 3 languages, Mandarin, English, and one of the European languages. And also we have implemented, very, frequent, some of the language basic classes so that, people can learn some basics of, Chinese. I have taken a few Chinese classes, one of our peers, they will post this in team time, so on and so forth. So that way, you will have even more dialogue, even if otherwise you'll be, a little bit hesitant in opening up. And that's your point, Lily. You say in the hallway when you pass, all you say is hi, or even with a gesture. They don't even open up their mouth because of, that language is not my main language. So the way that we alleviated that is to recruit, some translators from the beginning across all the regions, all the offices, and then also implement some, periodic classes so that those who are interested in understanding the new language skills, etc., so that they can be even more closer collaborative friends among your peers.
I would say Neo is the first company I've ever heard that has this program to make is very, very intentional from leadership to make the company very global and diverse, especially in the language space. Yeah.
It starts with the leadership, right? You cannot just have, for example, if you have, a Spanish speaking or a German speaking only an engineer on your team, and you are, majority of your other engineering mates are all English speaking, you can't expect him to learn English. Rather, of course you can teach him, but the best way to solve that is have a translator so that, that person or a group of minority won't be left alone. So that's a way to even foster innovation. Otherwise, you may be losing a cool, innovative idea from that engineer. He or she may not contribute because he cannot express himself or herself. So if you have a translator, every idea comes onto the table, and then the best idea wins, and then you get a much better innovative products or solution that you are designing.
So I think, Shen, you have something.
Yeah. Yeah, so Ganesh and I talked about this before, and I have a bit of a different take on it, right? I do think what Neo is doing, having a team of translators from the beginning, is amazing, and it helps people acclimate much faster than what I think anyone else is doing. But I think that if we like focus on companies, let's say you have a company in Silicon Valley that's really just based here, and it's not necessarily a global company, and people on the call who are watching are wondering what can I do, right? And so we had a situation at Tesla. I had a situation at Tesla where I'd hired some engineers from Mexico, really solid engineers. And their written English was amazing. Their spoken English was decent, but you realize that their comprehension wasn't very good. And so in every meeting, they never said anything, right? And so, what Tesla did is they actually hired a language coach for them, right? And so every person who's coming into Tesla, if English is their second or third or fourth language, they have the option to have English lessons on site during work hours because it helps them. The other thing is I recall having a meeting where I was looking around, and one of my teams at Tesla was incredibly diverse. There were people from I think at last count it was like 17 different countries, and so it was 5 or 6 different languages that people spoke first, and then but we did have a core of people for whom English was their first language, and so I made a rule that we really had to get rid of acronyms, because acronyms are something that they kill companies, and we had to all simplify our language, right? To allow someone who, because if you sit, even though I'm not technically an immigrant, I feel like an immigrant sometimes. And if you sit there and people start speaking in slang and things that you just don't understand, you feel very uncomfortable speaking. And so in order to allow like everyone in that team to be heard, if someone threw out an acronym or they threw out a word that came from a thesaurus, right? I would stop it and make sure that we kind of dumbed down how we spoke so that everyone could be included, right? Yeah.
So you literally take a proactive approach to help the person translate.
100%.
Okay, that's great.
I just wanted to plug another approach that folks could consider. Again, it's not always for every organization, but one of the things that I prefer to do in my teams is to do away with slide decks altogether, and to make sure that before the meeting there is a proper memo on what we're trying to achieve. The nice thing about the memo is, to Shen's point, oftentimes the reading English is far superior to the spoken English, and so by having meeting presenters actually write a memo and present the memo, sharing the memo ahead of time, it gives meeting participants an opportunity to contribute to the memo in the form of comments and things like that, effectively in an async way, but still giving them the opportunity to have their voices heard. So I'm a huge fan of writing, especially in diverse environments, and especially in situations where you have a highly distributed workforce with both time zone and country challenges.
Yeah, especially now. I mean, even now, the technology is so advanced now. The real-time translation is at your fingertip. For example, within my company, we use WeChat. It's a prominent, collaboration, real-time collaboration tool, and it works all the time. So there's a real-time translation feature. So you can speak and you can leave your voice, or you can write what you want to write in your own language. The message can be immediately translated. So there are technologies out there which we can actually solve it at your fingertip, how you want it, where you want it. So there's no reason why we cannot recruit people just because they speak only on one language. If the idea is bright, I think we should recruit, because technologies can help solve that problem also. In addition to the online classes and language coaches and so on and so forth, the suggestions that both the other panelists suggested.
Lily, I don't know that we like completely answer your question about how to deal with the people who are walking by and they say hello, but you don't feel like they necessarily mean it. I think Ganesh's point about mentorship earlier is something like I 100% believe in. I think that the mentor-mentee relationship is really beneficial for both parties, right? I personally have mentees, and I also have mentors, right? And I think people need to be, somewhat strategic about how they pick those people. Like, you should be part of picking your own mentor or picking your mentee, right? And a mistake I see a lot of people making is they pick mentors or mentees that are just like them, because they can always relate. And I think that first off, it's okay to have like a mentor who is just like you and has followed the same career path, but consider having another mentor who is very different, because then I think that that both parties will learn a lot.
I mean, mentorship can also be, in different forms. Like the formal mentorship is like, as you mentioned, buddying up with, it's a pairing of individuals, right? And there's also this concept of virtual membership, which is, to me, I believe, and it's driven by your passion. What I mean by that, for example, if I'm a sports enthusiast, then I always look at, for example, the Golden State Warriors, to look at what Steve Kerr as a coach was able to turn around that organization. It was one of the absolute in the bottom list until about 7 years ago, until Steve came in. And he turned around, he did some drafting and all that. Now look at that team became the talk of the town or talk of the world. And he completely transformed that organization, underperforming organization, into a world championship organization. Learn about Steve as a virtual mentor. How is he preparing for the games? How is he making the calls? Sometimes he puts Stephen Curry on the bench for 20 minutes. We all know we get pissed, or I get pissed when Curry is sitting on the bench. But the intention of the coach is, I want to win the game, no matter what. So that's an informal mentorship. If you're a movie person, you can look at, for example, Steven Spielberg as a director. Whatever movie he directs, it's always a blockbuster. Learn about him, read about him, how he is recording, how is he directing the movies. So the mentorship can be the formal or informal. Both are very, very effective. And that's another way to actually even develop more leaders from diversified backgrounds.
I think we talk a lot about investment, right? Like investment in translator, investment in tools and technologies. And then I think one thing that's interesting is even though we have to do those investments for the long and retain, we actually get them hired to begin with. And then for a lot of business leaders, they have not been doing it. Their biggest dilemma is, hey, I'm going around this revenue. I'm going around like a big dollar amount. And then why I want to spend the time and energy like to even deal with this? Like, what's your answer to those people?
The cost of losing people is quite high, and the cost of mistakes is huge, right? So Han really talked about belonging, right? And if you have people within your team that don't feel like they belong, they will leave. And replacing them is hugely costly. Then there's a story I probably shouldn't tell, but I'll tell it anyway. I remember when we were making the Model X at Tesla, and the car is designed. We were really close to production, and but most people, or everyone who was engineering leader on that project, is a man. And we were embarrassingly close to production before we finally said, "Hey, has anyone ever put a car seat in this car?" Right? And so there were like outside finding like some a woman in HR who had a car seat, transferring that car seat, making sure it worked, right? And it did. But it'd have been a really bad thing if this car that we were building for families, if the car seat didn't work properly, right? And that is something that's a mistake that would have been solved really, really early had we had more female representation, or not just female, but mothers, like people who had children and were people who were primarily responsible for the kids on the engineering teams early. Like that's something they would have checked the first time they would have driven the car. But we didn't, and that could have been, things like that could be huge mistakes, and you see that over and over when people are delivering, especially physical products, right? If they are not thinking about how different cultures will react to it, or how men or women will use the product differently, then they just have really crappy products. So that's what I'd say. It's like you're gonna knock down your mistakes, and you'll keep more people if you pay attention to this. And honestly, in today's world, I evaluate companies based on that. If I go and interview an interview with a bunch of companies, with a company, and every person I meet with is the same, I'm probably not going there.
I can echo that from my anecdotal personal experience. I think early in my career when I was interviewing, I find a really, really good company. I really, really love the manager is great. And then I asked this question when I in the interview, and like, I don't see a woman in the panel. Like, do you have a woman? So the answer is there's a person on the second floor. And I asked what that person do. my manager told my hiring manager told me it's a front desk assistant, and that is my decision to not even take that offer. It's my dream job. Personally. Cool. So we talk a lot about our own experience, our challenges, and how do we want to fix it. Are there any other ways we can solve it from the systematic level, like as a company, where we can create policies, processes, and then structures so that we can solve this problem more on the higher level? Sorry, Ganesh.
Okay, I'll go with that. There are many ways that we can solve it. One of the ways that comes to my mind immediately is, partner with some university, right? There are universities have a lot of course, bright talent, whether it's a male or female, doesn't matter. So tap into those ecosystems around the world, not just United States or China or Japan, Europe. Just have each of the organizations and the engineering leaders, especially where they came from, the alumni of Stanford, MIT, you name it, all of those universities, just tap into those ecosystems and then, get the professors, they will be able to give us a pool of talent with a diversified background. So that is one area that I think we should be able to start with to get more gender, culture, and different diversity folks into organizations.
I would say that I think every organization has to look at the inherent biases of how they hire. And what I mean by that is you'll find a lot of companies, especially when they're in a big growth mode, is they target other companies or certain universities to recruit from. And an example is, sometimes you'll see a lot of teams, at Apple that have a bunch of Tesla people, or vice versa, right? And when you do that, what ends up happening is you are adopting all the biases of that company or of that school. So I agree with Ganesh in that you do have to really examine the universities that you are that you're recruiting from. If you say, hey, I'm in the Bay Area, so I'm only going to hire from Stanford and Berkeley and UCSF or let's say, then you are saying that your company is going to look like those schools. And so you have to be really careful about examining those schools and saying, like, is that all I want, right? Should I not recruit from really good engineers in the Midwest or wherever, what other part of the country or outside of the country? And so I think that there are inherent biases that a lot of companies have just based on like, oh, there's this company out there that's awesome, go and recruit from them, right? We'll pay their engineers more. And what happens there is that you've just adopted the biases that other company has. And so you may end up with a talent pool that is 95% male, right? Because that's that's who exists in that company.
I just wanted to build on this university topic. So I happen to be from Berkeley. So anybody online, go Bears. I have a passion for recruiting from Berkeley, I have to say. And I go to all of our university events and whatnot. But I will tell you, that population is very, very specific. There are a lot of Asians, and there are a lot of boys. It really does hurt your diversity initiatives. One year we decided this wasn't going to cut it anymore, and so we decided to fly our recruiting team. This was a trip that I unfortunately did not get to go to Georgia Tech, and wow, like the resumes were totally different. The kind of people that were applying were just totally different. And they were awesome. They were just as good, as they were from a program that I am intimately familiar with. But there is a downside to being more sort of enlightened, so to speak, is that if you're say a California company and you're trying to get a kid from Georgia Tech to work here over the summer, your internship salary is not going to be able to pay for their rent to live here, right? And so you're going to have to be able to invest and really take this seriously and put your money where your mouth is, and potentially house those folks here. And that the economics are really different than hiring some local kid from Berkeley whose parents live in San Jose, so you don't have to pay for their rent. It is a commitment from these companies, but it is absolutely worth it. If you just look around, you'll see all kinds of opportunities to change your recruiting strategy.
It is pretty refreshing, I think. It's going to different schools and seeing different kids and like the compositions and what they are talking about and thinking about. Every single time I go for like universal recruiting, that's one of my favorite things. Like when I was doing the recruiting, I always have like very delightful experience. And then, but why do you feel the companies will go for specific patterns? I think that's one thing. Is easy, it's convenient, right? Like why we don't go for convenient?
It depends on how serious you are about pursuing diversity, right? Diversity inclusion. So you're right. It is really, what Han said, it's really easy, right? Like Berkeley's right up the road, right? And you already know that they're producing high quality students. But honestly, your company, long term, your company suffers if you're not diverse. And so, like every initiative, like you almost have to think about this as an R&D expense, right? So there's going to be some upfront costs of doing this. You're going to make some mistakes on the way, but long term, it is going to benefit your company. And more, your experience, Lily, actually kind of answers the question. You showed up at your dream job, you looked around, and you're like, "There are no other women. I'm not doing this." What happens when there's this really key hire that you want to make? That person is going to be a principal engineer in your company, and they come in and they're female or they're black, and they look around and they're like, "There's no one else like me. I'm just going to go to the next person that has more diversity." That is something that people are really keyed in on, and so there's always this hidden cost. Right. And by the way, this is the same thing is true there are a lot of companies that are primarily minority, right? And they would benefit from hiring more whites, right? Like they should do it. You shouldn't, like, if I go to, even if I went to a company and I interviewed with them and then every person was black, I'm less likely to take that job, because I think that you've pigeonholed yourself as a company.
Yeah, one other point I would add to that is, Sean, in the same line of recruiting, if you want to recruit more, for example, the female engineers onto your organization, what we have found is, there are some top engineering female-oriented conferences such as Grace Hopper, as an example. Sponsor such events. A couple of years ago, even last year, my company sponsored. In fact, I was there along with few of the senior leaders in the female engineering conference. We were able to recruit at least half a dozen. So we had an African American representative who used to work here, and her target was to attract the minority students from top-notch universities. We were able to find one or two such engineers as well at this part. So tap into all of those resources that are out there and that we should be able to. The other one is a women in tech forum. That is also getting a lot of popularity. We used to bring even thought leaders, female leaders, into our company once a month or once a quarter. Have them give a lecture about how they got to where they are today, to inspire the young, minority students. Like in this case, it's female engineers. So they all aspiring to become, such leaders in their own, whoever their role models are. So we try to bring such thought leaders into our company to give a speech or a talk about not just technology, in general about how they become where they are today. So such inspirational thing also organization can benefit, and resources are out there, and it's all free. So universities, conferences, all of them, I think all organizations should tap into recruit diversified workforce. Then innovation will be faster.
Okay, now we are about halftime in. I want to open up for our Q&A. There's already like a full slew of questions that's coming in my way. I'll start from the interesting one. How do you think about diversity background can improve or drag the decision-making process down? You have diverse opinions, and then you spend way more time, I guess, making the decision versus clear and done, and then down to execution.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately you're trying to get to the right answer, and oftentimes if you're trying to make a really difficult decision, and if you've got a bunch of people who think the same, right, have the same experiences, the answer to them will be obvious, right? They'll think it's obvious, and it may be the wrong decision. So you do need to have people who will look at things look at things from all angles, and try to figure and actually go down to the core. Like I live in the physical world, right? I my engineering is all physical, it's all products, and you need to like actually go down to the physics of why something happens. And something you find is when you don't have a diverse team, you end up with a lot of groupthink, right? And so you're like, oh man, we're moving really fast, and you may be just going fast in the wrong direction, right? And it's something that is seen pretty often in the automotive industry. You can look at a lot of products that people have put out there, and you realize that there's not a lot of diversity of thought within the company, so everything kind of looks the same, and maybe there are other alternatives, there were better alternatives out there.
So there's a question about actually a company with global presence. If a company has facilities in US and in other countries, how do we close the culture gap? Is people, the same word in one language may totally mean a totally different thing. And also there's also time zone differences. It's a very practical question. I open up to the panelists.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, I will relate a couple of examples that I had to deal with in one of my prior lives at a different company. This company started setting up a new office. It was in India, engineering organization in India. But the director, the vice president of the group, it's an American company who tried to expand into that part of the world, has never managed a team of Indian engineers effectively. The words, as you mentioned, Lily, is very, very important. For example, here, you might use the slang like, oh, that's a slam dunk. It means something, right? We know what slam dunk means. But if the manager says the same word to an engineer who comes from a different part of the world, who has never heard of that word, you have to explain and set the context what that means before you can actually use that word, right? Another example that comes to mind, for example, if I were you, I will talk to Sean. The message is, you better talk to Sean, right? The same phrase you were to use, that manager used to use to an engineer who has been on the other part of the ocean, no action may be taken because I'm not you, hence I'm not doing an action. But the message was, you better talk to Sean, right? So the words are important, how you are especially managing teams remotely with different background and all that. So make sure that there is a commonality and understanding of the words. And time zone is, in this world, time zone has no meaning. I think everybody expected to 7 connecting between your peers, technologies at your fingertips. I don't think time zone is an issue, but the language barrier is very, very important. But the first thing is to set the context. Then you explain what that meant. Then you will get the faster result. Otherwise, it'll be just a long process before you get the exact outcome that you're expecting in the first place.
I would add to that by saying that most organizations would do very well to ban acronyms. I once stood dying with laughter as two people nearly came to blows because they were talking about SOP. One person was meant standard operating procedures, and the other person meant start of production. And they were arguing with each other, nearly coming to blows, as I was dying with laughter because I was the only person to realize they were talking about two different things. But Ganesh is right. Like when I worked at a company that was early in my career, it was global, where we had a lot of people in Asia, in Europe, and in the US. And we had to really be clear about our language, right? And then we also had to respect the fact that, if we had meetings, if we had global meetings, we would rotate the times. So sometimes I'd have a meeting early in the morning my time, sometimes it'd be really late at night, not just always on the HQ schedule.
I have a couple of ideas for the audience if you want to take them up. To the extent that you don't have the ability to ban acronyms, and I've certainly been in those positions where it's beyond my pay grade, I think it's useful to at least either kickstart or lead an initiative to create a glossary somewhere in the knowledge base, so that at least new employees can kind of look them up, and of course have the process and procedures to keep them up to date, which I think is really the hard part. A couple of other ideas that I think really help smooth the communication challenges that you might see. I'm a big fan of a code of conduct. Take, for example, my expertise, which is in software. Sometimes when somebody says they'll get to a pull request, for some individuals, that means I expect the pull request to be the next day. In other cases, it might not happen for a full week. And different cultures have different levels of interpretation of when they expect a pull request to be complete. Personal feedback and how people get feedback. In certain cases, some cultures may be more direct than others. And so being very explicit about what is the behavior that you expect within the organization, and giving people permission to call each other out when that code of conduct has been violated, really helps smooth things. It at least normalizes the language between cultures to the expectations of the organization itself. And to the extent that you're not able to actually fly people back and forth, which I personally think is the best thing, just bring the teams over, have them hang out for a week. They'll learn all the nuances. They'll realize you're a human, I'm a human. It's super fun. If you can't do that, I find that having each person, I know this is going to sound like a little bit dorky, but work with me, is that have each person write a user manual. Like, these are my quirks. These are the things that I like, and just share it with your team. Something that small is very, very useful. And for folks that, that have families, that have a schedule, go through all of that, like the schedule, when you expect the calls, like if I don't get back to you in 2 days, it's not because I hate you. All of those little things will do a lot, not only in terms of smoothing over the communication, but as you're building teams, really create that sense of belonging.
And there's a question about an employee, how they speak up in the organization. We talk a lot about, as leaders, how do we make sure our organization is very diverse? If it's not, and then the person who's working in the employee want to speak, what's your recommendation for that?
Yeah, I mean, that happens. That's, to me, that's part of that character of that individual. I teach my boys all the time, when they were little, you need to raise your hand. Even if you're not being asked to raise your hand, you want to be noticed, you raise your hand. Even if you're making a silly comment, you're making a connection with that person immediately. He or she will never forget, oh, that person, that who made that silly joke the other day. If you don't raise your hand, you will never get noticed. So my direct feedback to whoever asks the question is, don't be shy. Do not be shy. Just raise your hand, even if you think that you may not know the answer or the questions or whatever that you raise the hand for. It's okay. You want to be noticed. That is how you become a prominent person and then, become more popular too, and personal branding as well in this part. So raise your hand, don't be shy.
I do think as leaders, we can also institutionalize some of these things. In addition to, surveys and polling, having very open office hours, inviting people to, come and just speak to you. That is, or on a video conference, that can be very powerful. Of course, as an individual, you may not have the opportunity to do that. I don't think it's very easy. I myself am a pretty shy person. I have been my whole life. So to the asker, I would only give you this one piece of advice. Years ago, when I first started my career, I was in a meeting with the CEO. My supervisor happened to be the co-founder of the company. And the meeting went on and on for about an hour. And I was just livid because I thought we were doing absolutely the wrong thing. And so at some point, even though I was always very shy, I couldn't control my temper. I stood up and I spoke my mind, and I thought I was going to get fired at that moment. I sat back down, and the CEO and my boss said, that's really smart. You made a really good point. We're not going to do this. And the lesson that I learned was that a lot of times we're afraid to speak up because we're afraid to look dumb. And the reality is that the times that you speak up and look smart do so much for your career than the times that you speak up and look dumb. And so if you're feeling a little bit shy and you cannot speak up, just remind yourself of that. And if you're still not convinced, just think about all the times when somebody said something smart and you go like, oh, Shen said something smart. He's a really smart person, versus the number of times you can think of when Shen said something dumb. And I would argue that people are a lot nicer than you think, and they will give you a lot more credit. So just use that thought exercise and try to speak up.
I actually connect with Ganesh and also Han very deeply on this topic. I remember my first promotion in my early career. I want to talk to my senior manager to give me that promotion. So I spent a whole 1 month thinking about this, why my promotion is not here, how come they don't value me enough. And then I spent another week to prepare pages of pages reasons why I should get promoted. So when the day comes, I run into my senior manager in the elevator. I said, hey, I think I do deserve a promotion in the elevator. And he looked at me and said, yeah, that's right. And then that's it.
Yeah.
And that's really it. People are a lot nicer. He's a lot nicer than I thought. I thought it's gonna be a uphill battle that's last many days, but it's not. The only thing that takes is I asked.
It's always the first time raising the hand is the hardest part. Once you start raising it, first time, second times, hands will automatically go up, right? You'll start speaking yourself up. So keep practicing. I think that's the advice that I will say.
Cool. There's a question about hiring. Oftentimes we hire candidates whose beliefs align with our mission, and then how do we avoid disqualifying people from different backgrounds?
That's a hard question. I think that most times what we need to hire for is people who are competent. And let's say you're trying to, build a software company, right, or whatever type of company you're trying to build. Essentially, the people who are not aligned with your mission will disqualify themselves, right? They will come through the process. And someone is not going to go work for Ganesh's company that's making electric cars if they don't believe the electric cars are the future, right? And so I would say that it is important, if you're a mission-driven company, it is important to make sure that the people you hire are missionaries, right? That they do want to go on this journey with you. But I think that if you do have a mission and you can make a really compelling mission, it becomes really easy for you to get diverse talent, because if you're mission driven, people can talk a lot. Like Tesla culture is pretty famous around here, right? It's hard, right? You go there, you work super hard. Elon sleeps on the factory floor, but people feel like they're on this mission, and so they've ended up in many cases with a relatively diverse. They're able to attract diverse talent because their mission is compelling. I'm not sure that I really answered the question, but I think that the people who are not people who don't want to be on your who don't share the same values of the company are going to disqualify themselves. I think in interview process, you have to be really clear about what the values of the company are, like what it is that the company values, and you will make a decision on people, but people also make decisions about you.
I have a last question I want to ask. This is a very specific question. Any suggestion for Asian female tech professionals to develop leadership from an early age from their career?
Could you repeat the question? That's why you broke up a little bit.
Any suggestions for Asian female tech professionals to develop leadership at early stage of their career?
Lily, you should answer that question, no?
You should answer.
Great. Let me give it a try.
I think I would say while you're thinking, I can share my 2 cents there. Right from the school age onwards, right? Right now there are, especially in the United States, all the schools have lots of clubs, like a leadership development thing, and in some school it's called FBLA, Future Business Leaders of America. So sign up for those clubs. So they will, thereby you'll be learning a lot of leadership skills, how to speak, how to write an essay, how to present a business plan. It's like a mini company experience that you will get it. The reason I gave that example, I used to coach, my son's high school, the FPLA club, while I was working at Tesla. So I sponsored this program, and I brought those kids to, Tesla to present their business case. And I had each one of those students speak up on their role. And there were a lot of, Asian kids on that part. I made sure that it is not just the project leader who speaks and presented the project. I asked each one of them, and then so as the rest of the panel members who evaluated the project, what was your role? And then can you just say in 5 sentences, what was your contribution? 2 things by asking for that thing. One is, A, it is a group project, not just 1 or 2 individuals who crafted it. B, are they able to articulate their role in the project? So, that team went to win the national championship in 2018, believe it or not. So there are a lot of constructs and leadership development courses right from the high school level. And once you go to college, I'm sure there are lots of other clubs, and internships is another great way to actually even get that sort of experience before you land on your professional jobs. So, just start communicating, just start sharing your stories, write blogs about it. There's infinite number of social media channels out there to showcase your talent. Just keep practicing. You will get there. That'll be my advice, and I've seen it working very effectively.
I'll give something like super quick. I think one of a bit of advice I always tell engineers that are interested in leadership, if you work for a company that has interns, right? Interns are on board for a finite amount of time. Work out with your manager where maybe one summer the intern works for you, right? And a lot of companies are just willing to do that, right? An intern's coming on board, they need to have someone who's a mentor, even if that person is only a couple years older than them, that's okay. And by just having that one that one person who's they're going to leave, you get some experience as a manager of someone, right? Without potentially changing your career where you take on an entire team, which could take longer. I don't know where this person's from, right? That asked the question, but one of my mentees, actually, she was a mentee of mine for a long time, for about 4 years at Tesla, is a woman from China, and you know, today she's still Tesla. She manages a fairly large team, and it was a struggle even to get her to start managing people at all. And so I think that, you know, I can only be very specific about her case, right? I can't make a general case for all Asian females, but in her case, you know, she had to adapt to the fact that she was leading a team in the United States. And so the expectations that she would have had as a Chinese woman if she were in China were very different than here. And so I think that, you know, my advice would be to go out there and find someone who is someone you admire, and spend some time talking to them about their journey. Right? It's someone who will give you like really frank feedback.
The reason why I froze when I said this question, because this question is so loaded. I was literally thinking through all my 10 years of experience, trying to distill it into 3 sentences. So I do thank you so much, Ganesh and Shen, for covering it for me. I summarize into three lines. Number 1 is, if you are Chinese, practice English first. I think one most important thing in my career, the best investment is, as soon as I graduate, I notice my English is not great. I pay for my ELS class. It's accent correction. Like I spend hours and hours trying to make my communication correct. And then the second piece is practice speaking squarely what you want. I think don't evade it. Don't divert from it. Just tell me what you want and tell people around you what you want and how they can help you. And that's very important to me. And then also in terms of mentorship, I think the other person also talked about mentorship. And you need 2 mentors at least, 1 female and 1 male. And the female will tell you all the lies people write in the books, and they are not going to work. And then the male is the one you can actually work it out. Like, does it even work? For all the things I learned. And then through the process, actually, you will develop a very strong bond with your mentors. And one of my mentors, the male mentor I have, was very shocked that I hide my achievements for most of the time. And he asked me why. I said, I will not be liked if I show my achievements to all my friends and families. And then the female mentor, the reason why she even mentored me when I was a new grad, and she's a senior director in Amazon. I want to call her out, Tina Dow, I really love you. She told me the reason why she mentored me is because she has no choice. Because of her career, she don't have a family, and then she don't have kids, and then she want me to have a choice. So that's very meaningful to me in my early career, that someone like this inspired me to do better. So there's one is I'm getting emotional. So I want to summarize our topic. Actually, is there are a lot of things. It's a very loaded question. How do we implement diversity, and how do we think about diversity? And then I heard from the panel that there are a lot of things that's important. We want to start from the beginning. We want to design it the right way. As a leader, we want to put the money in where our mouth says, and then we want to truly invest in it, from recruiting, from our day-to-day job, from technology. And then as people working in a diverse environment, we want to be empathetic. We want to create a very, very safe place for people to thrive. It may not be comfortable, it may not be easy, but it's the right thing to do. And it truly drives business outcome. I think that's the most important part, is we converge in the right place that everyone wants us to be, even though it may be taking many years. I'm really glad I'm part of this panel and sharing all my personal stories and your personal stories with the panelists. And then I think in the last 1 minute, I want to go around the panelists again and say, hey, if there's one thing there's only one thing you can give to the rest of the audience, and what is that one thing you want them to take home with?
Go with first. My key takeaway for all of you who are watching or listening will be, believe in yourself more so than you think you do. Because as humans, I believe we don't know what we don't know about ourselves. So you put your hand in your chest and you say, you know what? I'm the best engineer this world has ever seen. I'm the best in what I do. If you have that belief and you believe in yourself, you will go places, believe me. So that's one thing I want to leave you with. Believe in yourself more so than you think you do about yourself.
Cool.
Yeah. I don't know if mine's that profound. I would just say that always endeavor to do the right thing, even if it's the hardest thing to do. The business world is just filled. It's filled with failures where people try to do the thing that was easiest or the most convenient, and then it failed. I mean, there are examples of products like this, like the let's say the Boeing 737 Max. Had they just done the right thing in the beginning, they would not be in the position they're in today. And I think you can apply that to your own career too. Just always make sure that that you're taking the path that's the correct one and not the thing that is the easiest or the most convenient. Long term, you'll benefit from it.
And
I just want to add that this is a long observation that I've made for many, many years, but I know some of you work at really amazing companies, and I've certainly worked at some, but I think at the end of the day, people really work, they don't really work for companies, they work with people and they work for people. And I think in that sense, no matter where you are within the organization, I think there's a real opportunity to just lift each other up. Especially in these times when you may be part of a company that may be suffering from financial distress. It really helps support this idea of making people feel like they belong on the team, they belong in your group, they belong in this company. And I think that focus on belonging can be very, very powerful, not just for your work life and you having a good time, but also your colleagues. It may also help improve your DIBS numbers, and you guys might actually go build some cool stuff along the way.
thank you so much. Now I'm going to forward it back to Ross. Hey, Ross. Great.
Thank you, Lily. So again, thank you everyone for taking time to join us on this Friday afternoon. Really, really great sharing from everyone. I wanted to thank our speakers, Ganesh, Shen, Han, and our wonderful moderator, Lily, for taking the time to share with us your insights and hopefully give us some good action items, I think, very implementable action items going forward in order to implement more diversity and innovation within our organizations and for a lot of the members watching today. We'll be having updates soon, so keep posted on following SVLC for our new events. We'll have another one at the end of this month, the end of July, and just keep posted for the next events coming forward. Please reach out to us for your feedback on the sessions, and thank you again for joining, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you.